Hi, hope you're all doing well. So I've wanted to make this video for a few days now, while things were still happening in real time, but I was doing my monthly internet fast that Egypt forces upon everyone. So I'm a little bit late to the party, but it's still very important to talk about nonetheless, which is why I am here now. Let's just set the scene here a little bit. This video is about freedom in Egypt, or, well, lack thereof. Throughout the past decade or two, a lot of people who are stuck here have to live in closets, whether it's about their sexuality, beliefs, or whatever else really that strays from the status quo. Tolerance here is very little for differences. Recently, a professor in Suez University, Mona El-Brins, yes, that's her actual name, from the College of English Literature, has been suspended permanently, a decision which was made by the university board and then backed up by the official Supreme Court of Egypt itself. Now, you might be wondering, what did she do to deserve it? Surely, if the Supreme Court is involved, it has to be something unspeakable, right? Well, no. The official story is because she sets a bad model for her students. How so? By posting videos of herself oriental dancing in her own private home on her own personal socials. Here's a brief news report about it.
إذا قضت المحكمة الإدارية العليا المصرية برفض الطعن الذي قدمته الدكتورة منى، وهي الأستاذة بقسم اللغة الإنجليزية في كلية التربية في جامعة قناة السويس، وأكدت عزلها على نحو النهائي من العمل في الجامعة المصرية. وبحسب المحكمة فإن الطعن رفض بعد أن ثبت في حق الأستاذة نشرها عدة تسجيلات مع إصرارها على تكرار نشر مقاطع متعددة بما يسيء من هيبة أستاذ الجامعة ومن رسالته ومسؤوليته بحسب المحكمة. ورأت المحكمة أن الأستاذة بنشرها فيديوهات الرقص خرجت عن التوصيف العلمي للمقررات الدراسية ونشرها أفكارا غير مسؤولة. وأخيرا أوضحت المحكمة أن الرقص مهنة لمن يحترفها ويمارسها داخل صالات العرض المتخصصة، مشيرة إلى أنه لا يجوز للأستاذة أن تتخذ من الرقص شعارا لها علانية تدعو به الناس بما ينال من هيبتها أمام طلابها.
Now, right off the bat, I know this sounds very ridiculous, but it goes a little deeper than that, which we'll get to in a minute. The videos themselves, by the way, are totally fine. They're not explicit in any way. Not that that should matter, but even by this society's warped conservative standards, it should be okay. Here's a small sample of it. As you saw earlier in the news piece, the official court statement says dancing is a profession for those who practice it within show halls dedicated for it, and it is not appropriate for a college professor to take up dancing as a public signature to draw people in, damaging her image in the process in front of her students, embarrassing her female students, and humiliating her fellow female professors, considering that she is a role model equal to them. Now, as damning as this already sounds to the court, it gets even worse. Dancing is not illegal here. I mean, just look at someone like Farida Fahmy. You can Google her if you want to know more, but in a nutshell, she's a very famous Egyptian dancer and actress. And obviously there are many more examples like her. So it's safe to say that the whole dancing gig was not really the main issue here, but more like just extra ammo to pump their masses against the professor. On a small tangent though, they could still detain you for dancing anyway and slap indecent exposure charges or some other vaguely related charge on it if they so wished. But that was not the case here for the professor. The real issue, one she had been involved in long before, is about religion. The court statement follows up with a rant saying it is not appropriate for a college professor to propagate chaos, promote dancing publicly and touch on religious beliefs, disturbing the minds of students about religious constants, assaulting the divine, spreading destructive ideologies, and accusing Allah and the three religions of lying, praising the devil, and desecrating what is holy, all under the cover of literal analysis. They could have just said that she insulted religion, you know, for the sake of brevity, but they had to demonize her as much as they could. How dare this bitch have an opinion on anything here? While we're on this topic, I would like to let you know that contempt of religions is an actual legal charge here, one which the professor had been charged with before, by the way. An interesting thing you will notice is how the charge says religions, plural. In reality, it only applies to Islam. You can talk shit about Christianity all you want, and Jewish is straight up used as an insult here. I'm not even joking. Needless to say, any other religion that exists is also fair game to contempt, and even other Muslim groups, for example Shia, which are actually subject for a lot of memes on Egyptian socials, and nobody seems to mind. So this charge only applies to the majority that is in Egypt. And by the way, we have our religion stated in our IDs, and it can only be either Muslim or Christian. If you are still somehow not convinced that there is a very blatant double standard situation here, here's a piece of news to back this up. On presidential pardon, Egyptian terrorist Ahmed Sebeir is set free, a man who is described as the worst enemy of Christians in Egypt. Will he return to his old ways of promoting violence against Christians and killing non-believers by doxing them? This asshole is pretty big on YouTube, by the way, and influences a lot of young Egyptians of his likeness. If you punch in his name in the search bar, a channel pops up where most of the content is his, which was what got him arrested in the first place, considering the hate speech that he spreads. Back to the problem at hand. The last segment I have to show you from the court statement is really something else. It says, personal freedom does not mean permission to openly oppose societal values and traditions, and freedom of belief is preserved only as long as it stays, quote, captive within yourself, without announcing what openly opposes the main religions, and it is not to be taught to students, unlike the constants of religion. So now you can see that her main offense was in fact openly discussing these ideas. Keep in mind though that she is a professor of literature, so naturally such concepts may very well come up. They should, and besides, to teach or learn critical thinking, you need to look at such ideas neutrally, which is something religious people normally fail terribly at, but especially Egyptians. Here is a little background story that I pulled from Dr. Mona's Facebook profile. When I was in Claremont University in California in 2014, I was teaching scripts from modern Arabic literature, one of which was a chapter from Our Ali's Children by Naguib Mahfouz. I would ask the students to read the text, read up about it, and then write their own criticism. So one of my students started reading his work, starting with Allah and His Children, to which I reflexively objected. Allah and His children? Allah does not have any children. What are you saying? For context, to those who don't know, a main cornerstone of Islam is the singularity of Allah. A very basic verse from the Quran, and perhaps the most commonly known one, says, say He is Allah, the One, Allah the Eternal Refuge. He neither begets, nor is born, nor is there to Him any equivalent. So you can see that this is a pretty big deal to Muslims, and thus you can get thrown behind the sun for saying what that kid just so nonchalantly said. She continues, the student was startled from my reaction and apologized, but I then quickly realized my hysterical response and told him, no, I'm the one who's sorry. You have the right to say your view, you're free to do so. I just am from Egypt and we don't have that freedom there. At the time, I was fresh out of a contempt of religions case because I criticized the Sheikh Muhammad Hassan, a big Egyptian sheikh and Muslim spokesman. The student had written a fantastic essay. So when I returned to Egypt, I thought to myself, my students in Swiss are no less important than the ones in America, and I have to up their critical skills. So when the course came to a part about John Milton's epic, Paradise Lost, which is starred by the devil, Astaghfirullah al-Azim, I told the students to read the same novel by Naguib Mahfouz, Our Ali's Children. Now this novel has come up twice now, but what's so special about it? Well, to put it simply, it's one big analogy for Allah and us, humanity. Naguib Mahfouz won a Nobel Prize in literature for it, and it also earned him an assassination attempt by a Muslim extremist. The dude who attempted to stab him in the neck was caught and interrogated and stated that he never even read the book. He simply heard from some sheikh that Naguib is a blasphemer and attacked Allah in his book. Of course, they don't question their sheikh, so that was more than enough to go off on a literal murder in the name of his God, of course, so it's not really murder in his eyes, and some other works of literature, so that they can compare the different images of the devil across various literal works. The apocalypse came for me. This was 6 months before the whole dance video thing, by the way, and it never really settled back down until the university finally expelled me and the court backed its decision. This is pretty much it. The last segment of her post is just a nice wholesome send-off. I have no regrets. In my days, the professor was a demigod, being the only one with knowledge. There was no internet or modern libraries. We were like refugees, totally dependent on the information the professor dictates to us. But nowadays, things are open and all points of view are available online. Therefore, the demigod role of the college professor is no more, although sadly some still act that way since they have complete power to make a student pass or fail. My heart lies with the students and always will. Knowledge is not in the books that you are forced to buy. The world is vast. Read and expand your minds and develop your hobbies. We all know college is just a certificate and doesn't even necessarily qualify you to work in a decent place. And most of all, enjoy your lives. This is all in line with my last video about education, but coming from an actual college professor this time. Also, on a small ironic note, the report against her was filed by one of her female students. YouTube goed?
You too, my child.
There's an interview with her that I found as well that gives a bit more context into this whole shit show.
الأزمة الأولى كانت اتهامك من بعض الطلبة اللي موجودين في الجامعة إنك أنت بتزدري الأديان وبتكلمهم في الجنس وإنك بهائية وإنك ملحدة، ثم الموضوع خف شوية وبين ظهر موضوع الفيديو، وده دفع بعض الناس إن هم يقولوا ده إحنا قدام دكتورة غاوية شهرة كل شوية تعمل فرقعة وتطلع للناس عشان تبقى مثار حديث السوشيال ميديا والفضائيات. رايك ايه بقى في الكلمتين دول؟
بص حضرتك، هما يعني بالنسبه لموضوع الازدراء الاديان والموضوع المشكله الحاليه برضو، الفكره كلها انه انا بعتمد تحديدا كان الماده دي اسمها ماده محادثه، وكنت بعتمد فيها على الحوار مع الطلبه، مناقشه الكارنت افيرز، الاحداث الجاريه اللي حاصله في المجتمع المصري والطلبه كانت عاده بتختار. يعني انا كنت بقترح موضوعات، هم بيقترحوا موضوعات، وكنت بقسمهم جروبس وبخليهم يعملوا برزنتيشنز. اللي كان حاصل في وقتها، الكلام ده كان 2012، كان في ظواهر التحرش الجنسي الجماعي والاغتصاب اللي حصل في ميدان التحرير. يعني وكتب عنها مقالات، ويعني ظاهره ما نقدرش
كل بيت في مصر،
ما نقدرش
التلفزيون يتكلم، كل الناس
يعني ما نقدرش ننكرها. تمام. بعديها كان حرق كنايس. فانا قلت للطلبه طيب الموضوع بتاعنا النهارده هنتكلم في التحرش الجنسي، وخليتهم يقروا مقالات كانت موجوده بالانجليزي، اقروا وهنتناقش فيها بالانجليزي. وعدى الموضوع. المحاضره بقى بتاعت ازدراء الاديان دي حصل انه كان في حرق كنيسه، فانا حتى كتبت على الصفحه على الفيسبوك بتاعت الكليه اللي بيبقى فيها اساتذه وطلبه. في ضوء الاحداث الحاليه احنا هنناقش موضوع الفتنه الطائفيه، هل في تمييز طائفي وتمييز عنصري في مصر ولا مفيش؟ سؤال وردوا، نفتح الحوار، لانه ده موضوع امن قومي. انا كجامعه مش بدي ماده علميه فقط، انا كمان في حاجات بتحصل في المجتمع المصري ما ينفعش.
ده في صميم المنهج وصميم الماده اللي
وانا الماده دي مفتوحه، وانا بشتغل على حوار باللغه الانجليزيه بيست على، قلت لهم اقروا مقالات من على الاهرام ويكلي، الايجيبشن جاسات اللي هي ناطقه بالانجليزي، او من على
المنهج على فكره اللي بيطلع وزير التعليم العالي ورؤساء الجامعات يقول لك احنا عاوزين يبقى في نقاش وحوار ما بين الطلبه والاساتذه واشتراك مع قضايا المجتمع. تمام،
بالظبط، ده اللي انا بشتغل عليه. الحوار اتفتح لا ايه، انت بتتكلم بقى في عناصر مختلفه، دور الشيوخ،
الناس بتقول ارائها
الوهابيه، وساعات الطلبه بتسالني رايي فبقول رايي. وقلت مصر كمان ما كانتش كده، احنا ما كناش كده. اتاخد الكلام واتفهم غلط، وبتحريض من رئيس القسم وقتها، كان هو اخواني، والراجل ده يعني هو طول الوقت الطلبه حكوا لي بعدين ده كان بيطلع عليا اشاعات. الطلبه داخله الكليه سامعه اشاعات اوريدي عني. اشاعات دي ان انا بهائيه، ان انا ملحده، ان انا بدرس جنس. لما بدرس عن التحرش الجنسي ابقى بدرس جنس. مره طالبه جت قالت لي دكتوره هو حضرتك بتدرسي روايه فيها صور جنسيه؟ صور ايه؟ فيديو؟ مش انا ما فهمتش بتقولوا ايه. لا اصل حضرتك بيقولوا، مين اللي بيقولوا؟ فده كان كلام منتشر. احب اقول لك بس امبارح رئيس الجامعه قال ان انا اتحولت للتحقيق 2002 و2004 و2005 ومش عارف ايه، وبعدين 2012 2013 مشاكل. الفتره اللي انا ما اتحولتش فيها للتحقيق بقى هي الفتره اللي ما كانش موجود فيها رئيس القسم الاخواني، ده كان بيشتغل في الخليج. قبلها لاسباب مختلفه. انا كتبت بوست على الفيسبوك الحقيقه جامعه السويس، وانا ايه مشكلتي مع جامعه السويس؟ اول حاجه انا ست غير محجبه. ورئيس القسم ده حاول يجتذبني وتحجبي وربنا يهديكي وشغل اساتذه تانيين في نفس القصه، وشكرا انا غير محجبه. نصلي مع بعض، لا انا بصلي لوحدي، ما بصليش جماعه. بيبيع كتب للطلبه، انا كنت بجيبها بتخفيض من مكتبه الانجل المصريه.
انت عندك مشكله مع شخص مش مع الجامعه؟
لا، ما هو حضرتك هو اللي وصل الامور بتواطؤ مع ناس تانية ان انا اتحولت للتحقيق.
طيب خلينا نروح بقى
وسلط الطلبه ان هم يكتبوا شكوى. الطلبه ما بتعرفش تقول الكلام ده لوحدها كده، في حد وراهم وخلاهم يجمعوا توقيعات. امبارح رئيس الجامعه قال التوقيعات دي كلها سليمه. لا، هي مش سليمه، لان الطلبه بعتوا لي على الفيسبوك بقى احنا ما كناش موجودين في المحاضره، بس قالوا لنا انت ضد الاسلام. فاحنا بقى يعني احساسهم بالنخوه واحساسهم بانه في حاجه ضد دينهم خلتهم ياخدوا موقف غير اخلاقي.
So, after seeing all this, I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about women's rights here. I mean, let's be real, this whole situation would have been a lot less severe if the professor was just a man. It's no secret that Egypt as a whole is in rapid decline right now and has been for a while. And naturally, when a country is circling the drain, so does its society. And the first thing that gets stepped on is freedom in all its forms, but especially women's. Even the so-called land of the free is not exempt from that too. And yes, I am referring to Roe v. Wade. But let's stay on topic here. Egyptian women have had it pretty rough for centuries, and while we had some relative breakthroughs in the 20th century, we are now very far behind and still moving even further backwards. I mean, you know, a country has no real freedom when its very own Supreme Court explicitly says that you are allowed to believe what you want as long as you keep it secret and live by society's rule anyway. Like, that is by definition not freedom. This woman had her career terminated for exercising her basic freedoms within the context of her career. Even, like, this is part of her job if she's to do it properly. And as it is to be expected of Egyptians, you have your fair share of retards cheering for this shit. And for the record, I'm not saying everyone has their head up their ass, just some of the people, but we all know this disclaimer is pretty much useless since they don't even watch whatever they're commenting on. On a final note, I would like to compare two women from Egypt. The first is from the older days, like really long ago, when Egypt was still developing. Nabawiya Musa. She fought for women's rights to education and to dress freely. She even founded her own feminist magazine, advocating for and spreading women's rights and freedoms. I know this is all basic shit now, but this was in the early 1900s, okay? So in context of its time, this woman was a pioneer, and she set in motion a lot of progress in the region. The second woman I would like to talk about is from our current time, an influencer by the name of Mona Abu Shama. One of her marvelous quotes goes something like, "We, women, are servants and entertainment for our husbands who are free to marry or divorce us as they see fit, and we live off their crumbs." Conservative degeneracy at its finest, if you ask me. And as it is to be expected of her type, she was also among those defending the douchebag who killed Naira Ashraf by slut-shaming the victim. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and want to know more, you can watch the videos I made on the situation when it was happening, because I'm not going to rehash on it now. Now, to do a side-by-side, this first woman was fighting for a real cause and actually had an impact on society in a time when such things were unheard of, pretty much. The second one, meanwhile, is working to reverse that progress in a time such as ours, no less. That just gives you an idea of how far gone Egypt is and where we're headed as a society, because trust me, this will not get any better, or at least stop getting worse anytime soon. And by the way, despite the state of society at Nabawiya's time, she never, in her lifetime, ran into any legal issues of any kind, despite being an activist who greatly and publicly opposed the social norm at the time, which just goes to show that we are at an all-time low, in fact. Well, that was depressing, but I believe it was necessary to talk about such an issue. If anything, may it be a scratch in the facade they have set up to let the world know what life here is really like for a minority. I want to thank Zolan for their support. If you want to support my escape from Egypt, you can do that on Buy Me a Coffee. It only takes a minute and no sign up is required. Every donation is a step closer, and you also get a shout out at the end of my next video every time you donate. Another way you can help me is by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing if you're not. I would like to have you around regularly. You sound like a lot of fun. And if you want to come hang out with me and some of my viewers, you can join the Discord as well. Links to all that can be found in the description and channel bio. All that being said, I love you all so much, and until next time, take care.